Roll back the years. Look at 1775 in the history of North America. Here are 13 English colonies growing restive under of a great nation. Minutemen are preparing to fight for colonial rights. They adopt as their own Yankee Doodle, an English song composed to ridicule them. But they are not thinking of independence. Benjamin Franklin's observation made a year earlier still holds good. Said Franklin, "I have never heard from any person, drunk or sober, the least expression of a wish for independence." April 17th, 1775, British troops and counter-minutemen gathered at Lexington to resist oppression. A colonial musket is accidentally discharged into the air. The redcoats fire, killing 8 Americans, and then march to Concord to destroy colonial military supplies. At Old Concord Bridge, the redcoats meet defeat and are forced to retire hastily toward Boston, while avenging Patriot rifles crack from every hedge. On July 6th, the Second Continental Congress declares our cause is just. Against violence we have taken up arms. The war for independence has begun. July 4th, 1776, the Continental Congress adopts Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. The historic document proclaims, "These united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states." England scoffs at the declaration, but after 6.5 embattled years comes Yorktown. On October 19th, 1781, Washington, aided by the French, forces the British General Cornwallis to surrender. At imposing ceremonies, the British lay down their arms. The fighting is over at last, and the Americans march home proudly waving their flag. 13 stripes and 13 stars, jubilant crowds greet them. Victory, a new nation rejoices. But the world does not recognize American independence at once. First comes a boundary dispute. Here are the American claims. 18th century mapmakers believed wrongly that the source of the Mississippi lies above the Great Lakes. Hence, the American, the supposed source, includes these lakes. Spain also has claims to North America. It is now that the Spaniards see this situation. They claim all the land beyond the Appalachian Mountains, which would give them the fertile Mississippi and Ohio basins, and restrict the Americans to a narrow coastal strip. France offers to settle the dispute to her own advantage. She proposes a neutral zone protected partly by Spain and partly by the United States, confining American territory to the coast strip, for France does not want the new nation to become too powerful. England makes various claims, of which this is the most important. Based on 74, it would give England control of the Great Lakes and the supposed source of the Mississippi River. Let's compare the English claims with the American. Obviously, the hottest dispute lies in the area around the Great Lakes and the upper Mississippi Basin. Both sides demand those lakes and the supposed river source. And here is what each side gets. Under the Provisional Peace Treaty of 1782, the boundary between the United States and Canada runs along the highlands of the Lake Unpleasantness. From the Great Lakes, the line to the Lake of the Woods and due west flows. Then the boundary follows the Mississippi down to the 31st degree of north latitude, where it turns east and follows that latitude and various waterways until it reaches the Atlantic. Florida is left to Spain. On these boundaries, the final Treaty of Peace is signed in Paris on September 3rd, 1783. This treaty not only defines territorial limits, but equally important, formally establishes the independence of the 13 colonies. But they are no longer just 13 mutually jealous colonies. They have become one nation. The spirit of independence has triumphed. All the world recognizes the starry banner of a free country, the United States of America. The map of North America is changed. A democracy has been born and the 13 colonies have become 13 states. But there remains a vast domain to the west which is still to be occupied. It is an American domain now, but little is known about it. Surveyors therefore ride into the wilderness to examine and measure the terrain. They return with stories of virgin forests and rich soil. Excited by this news, settlers start westward with ox carts over the Alleghenies. Soon wagon trains grind through the mud toward the land beyond the mountains. Then saws topple trees. Hammers ring on nails. Mortar binds foundation stones. But even now, the new communities are threatened by events in faraway Europe, where Napoleon Bonaparte, by a series of startling military victories, became first consul of France and virtual dictator of a considerable part of Europe. Dreaming of a great colonial empire in North America to replace the one which England has already wrested from the French, Napoleon forces decadent Spain to sign the secret treaty of San Ildefonso in October 1800 and cede to France Louisiana, this vast region which includes the mouth of the Mississippi, which is of vital importance to settlers of the new American domain. Let's see why. Here is the Appalachian mountain range, a barrier between the Mississippi and Ohio basins and the coast. Thousands of pioneers have crossed this range to reach the fertile river basins, and they know from first-hand experience with mud and ice and snaky roads that the journey over the mountains is long and hard. Yet here they are, settled in the interior. They're producing lumber, furs, and many other commodities which can be sold profitably to the people of the East. To send these products overland in wagons is expensive and risky, but Mississippi and its tributaries drain this region. Produce can be loaded on rafts and carried easily and cheaply to New Orleans, where sailing ships wait to transport it to rich eastern cities or to Europe. That's the way to do it. That's the only way. The Westerners build flatboats and the products stream out. By 1800, some 3/8 of the commerce of the United States is passing through the port of New Orleans. At present, Spain still controls this port, but Spain is decaying, so she probably won't make trouble. President Jefferson hears rumors of the French-Spanish treaty. To his envoy in Paris, he writes, "From the day that France takes possession of New Orleans, we must marry ourselves to the British fleet and nation." Suddenly, Spain closes the port to American commerce. France assumes control. Jefferson dickers with Napoleon. Then comes April 30th, 1803. America pays France $15 million for... A dispute arises over West Florida. Spain declares this region is not included in the Louisiana Purchase. The United States claims it is. In 1812, President Madison's American troops to seize the striped area on the map. The bitter quarrel continues. By this time, settlers are crossing the Mississippi River, and long wagon trains are moving into the Great Plains bought from France. It thus becomes important to determine definite boundaries for the new territory. Let's go back a bit. Here is the Red River Basin, the northwestern part of the nation as it was in 1783. As we know, people then believed that the Mississippi River started above the Great Lakes. So the boundary line between the United States and Canada ran westward from the Lake of the Woods until, presumably, it met the Mississippi. Eventually, the river's true source was located. And in 1803, this line, proposed by James Madison, then Secretary of State, was practically agreed on by both England and the United States. Final papers were never signed, however, for the purchase of Louisiana made such a settlement disadvantageous to America. American diplomats argue that the 49th parallel of latitude is the proper boundary. England will not at first agree. The Red River Basin area remains in dispute until October 20th, 1818. England accepts the proposed line. Both countries stipulate that it shall not extend beyond the Rocky Mountains. This agreement adds more new land to the United States, a wedge-shaped piece which is later to constitute a large part of the states of Minnesota and North Dakota. The nation continues to grow, and now growing pains are felt in Florida. This time it's eastern Florida, which is still owned by Spain. Except for a strip along the coast, it's a region of deep swamps and dense tropical forests. Americans describe it as a haven for runaway slaves and a base for extensive smuggling operations. In the most inaccessible parts of Florida live the fierce Seminole Indians. These savages are friendly to the runaway slaves which creep to them for protection, but they hate the rich white planters to the north and constantly plan attacks. Around nocturnal campfires, the tom-toms beat the war dance. Then the Seminoles slip across the border to raid American plantations, and Spain, which has pledged herself to halt these raids, is unable or unwilling to act. So, the red-skinned marauders often return to their camps with their ox carts heavy with loot. The Indians become bolder, and finally, in 1818, General Andrew Jackson pursues the raiders into Florida. Accusing the Spaniards of helping the Indians, he captures Pensacola and St. Marks and takes possession of Florida. The Seminoles retire to their swamps where Old Hickory can't catch them, but the Spaniards call Jackson's campaign an act of war. The situation is at a crisis. Spanish territory has been invaded by an American army. Will Spain strike back? No. In the negotiations that follow, she abandons the peninsula to the young nation and the United States assumes payment of $5 million worth of claims which Americans hold against Spain. February 22nd, 1819, a treaty signed in Washington gives the United States all of Florida, thus ending the old controversy over West Florida. More land for the United States, land 12 times as large as Connecticut. The eastern seaboard of the nation is now complete. The Northwest reaches to the Rockies. America has attained 2/3 of her final territorial size, but pioneers still push forward. Paddle wheel steamboats now speed along the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. These waterways have become the arteries of the nation. Commerce flows freely between the interior cities and Atlantic coast ports. Good land is plentiful, business hums, yet many Americans look eagerly toward the country beyond the frontier. And the people of New Spain look at the United States and envy her independence. Why can't they also overthrow a tyrannous rule from overseas? In 1810, they revolt. But old Spain is still too powerful. The struggle continues until 1824, when revolutionists expel their stern overlords and proclaim the Republic of Mexico. To populate the country between the Rio Grande River and the United States, the Mexican government offers free land to settlers. American wagon trains roll westward again. Attracted by the rich country, hundreds of adventurous immigrants move into the plains beyond the border. By 1830, more than 20,000 Americans are settled in the Mexican province known as Texas. A foreign soil is dotted with little American towns where hard-riding hombres stop to hobnob in saloons and debate personal questions with six-shooters. The President of Mexico becomes alarmed at the increasing strength of the Americans. He forbids further immigration from the United States. He cancels most of the land grants. March 2nd, 1836, Texas declares her independence of Mexico. President Santa Anna leads an army to punish the province, but at San Jacinto is routed by Sam Houston's band of Texas volunteers. Texas independence is assured. The province becomes a republic with a constitution like that of the United States. Sam Houston is elected president. He asks the American government to admit Texas to the Union. But Andrew Jackson, now president, refuses to admit the new republic. Annexation of Texas might lead to war with Mexico. Furthermore, it would enrage Northerners who suspect a Southern plot to gain another slave state. Martin Van Buren follows Jackson into the White House. Van Buren, a Northerner and an enemy of slavery, also opposes the admittance of Texas. After Van Buren comes William Henry Harrison, who dies after 2 weeks in office. Vice President John Tyler, a friend of slavery, succeeds him as chief executive. Tyler, assisted by his Secretary of State John Calhoun, pushes through Congress a joint resolution admitting Texas. December 29, 1845, Texas enters the Union as the 28th state. To satisfy Northerners that the admission of Texas is not a Southern plot, annexationists join in the demand for an equal territory in the Northwest known as Oregon. Southerners agree that if Texas is to be slave territory, Oregon shall be free. Let's examine the various claims to this region. One American claim dates from 1792, when Captain Robert Gray of Boston discovered a great Oregon River. The Boston skipper sailed into this broad stream and named it after his ship, the Columbia. Later, Lewis and Clark spied out the land. Commissioned by President Jefferson, these courageous explorers crossed the Rocky Mountains in 1804 and descended the Columbia River to the sea. America, therefore, claims the valuable region by right of discovery and exploration. And that starts another international argument. Because Spain has claimed the same region plus additional land since 1790. All she wants is the Pacific coast section of North America up to the 61st parallel. She bases her theory of ownership on a series of voyages made by early Spanish explorers. But wait. Russia asserts that the expeditions of her fur traders have delivered this section over to the Tsar. His Imperial Majesty decrees that only Russians may approach the coast above the 51st parallel. His edict inspires considerable raucous laughter. Finally, England maintains that she owns the land. Why? Well, because Sir Francis Drake sailed past it before any rival explorers hove in sight. Furthermore, says England, Vancouver explored the coast while Captain Gray found a river. And if that isn't enough, the British-owned Hudson Bay Company has established trading posts in the area. And here are the conflicting claims. Is somebody going to be disappointed? Yes. In the treaty which gives Florida to the United States, Spain limits herself to the 42nd parallel, and Russia, under a pact signed in 1824, retires to parallel 5440. This leaves the area between parallels 42 and 5440 to the joint occupancy of the United States and England. Both nations consider this arrangement satisfactory for the present and later agree to continue it indefinitely. However, wagon trains are now creaking over the Rockies. By 1845, more than 7,000 Americans call Oregon their home, yet the boundary between the United States and Canada is here undefined. James Polk, campaigning for president, demands that England yield the whole territory. He adopts the slogan, 5440 or fight. But after Polk gains office, the nation faces a war with Mexico. So Polk compromises with England on the 49th parallel. June 15, 1846, Oregon becomes American territory. Another crisis approaches. Texans contend their new state extends southward to the Rio Grande. Mexicans retort that the Nueces River is the correct border. The disputed area is shown here. Meantime, President Polk sends representatives to adjust the differences. Mexico refuses to receive them. Then Polk dispatches General Zachary Taylor to the Rio Grande with orders to defend American property. Mexicans declare he has invaded their territory, and April 24, 1846, Mexicans fire on Americans. Several American soldiers are killed. When the news reaches Washington, Polk rushes a vital message to Congress, concluding with these words: Mexico has passed the boundary of the United States, has invaded our territory and shed American blood upon American soil. War exists by the act of Mexico herself. Both House and Senate overwhelmingly approved the president's message, and 19th century newspapers, making use of the Pony Express and the new magnetic telegraph, flashed the story of the Mexican War to the world. Washington, Monterey, September 24th. Mexican City stormed by American troops. Buena Vista, February 24th, 1840. General Taylor victorious. Santa Anna's army cut to pieces. Veracruz, March. American troops successfully land at Mexican port. March 27th, Veracruz captured. 4,000 Mexicans made prisoners. Mexico City, September 13th. General Winfield Scott takes Mexican capital. Tremendous loss of life. Santa Anna flees to Guadalupe. And finally, February 2nd, 1848, Treaty of Peace signed at Guadalupe, Hidalgo. Mexico is required to cede to the United States the territories of California, Arizona, and New Mexico, and recognize the Rio Grande River as the boundary of Texas. In return for all this, the United States agrees to pay Mexico $15 million. More new land for the United States. The Mexican cession totals more than 500,000 square miles. This addition extends the American Southwest to the Pacific Ocean. The nation now reaches from coast to coast in the south as well as in the north. America has become a power. Our territorial expansion is almost completed. But now, gold gleams in California. Wagon trains jolt across the Rockies toward the new El Dorado. Ropes ease the heavy vehicles down mountain trails. It's a slow and dangerous way to travel. Back in the east, a better way is being developed. Draftsmen are designing American models of the steam locomotive recently invented in England. Laborers are digging roadbeds, and track crews are laying rails for what is to be the greatest railroad transportation system in the world. By 1850, more than 9,000 miles of tracks are in operation, and both passengers and freight travel between eastern cities on trains like this. Look out, that limited is rushing along at a speed of nearly 15 miles. The California gold rush intensifies the demand for a railroad along the 32nd parallel to link east and west. Part of this route lies in a Mexican region whose boundary is in dispute. President Pierce appoints James Gadsden minister to Mexico and instructs him to settle the argument by purchasing the land needed for the railroad. December 30th, 1853, Gadsden negotiates a treaty whereby America pays Mexico $10 million for 29,000 square miles of territory. This assures construction of the Southern Pacific Railroad. With the Gadsden Purchase, the nation attains her final size. She has grown for 70 years. These were her original outlines, as determined by the Treaty of Paris in 1783. Let's briefly review the stages in her development. Louisiana was purchased from France in 1803. Florida was ceded by Spain in 1819. Texas was annexed in 1845. Oregon was obtained by treaty with England in 1846. The Mexican cession became part of the United States in 1848. The Gadsden Purchase was acquired from Mexico in 1853. Thus, in 70 years, the lifetime of a man, a weak nation of 13 states has grown into a mighty republic. Her people have trudged through forest and swamp, through dusty desert and cool mountain pass to reach the lands beyond the horizon. For these lands hold the secret of national strength, the strength of the modern 48 states. They yield iron and petroleum, coal and lead, silver and copper and gold. They flower in snowy cotton and yellow grain. The wealth of the earth is found in abundance in the lands toward which the wagon trains roll. The old wagons have vanished down the trails of the past. They have left behind them a nation which reaches from ocean to ocean, a nation symbolized by a flag of 48 stars, the United States of America.